Awesome. Thank you, Peter. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the purpose of today's presentation is to just give you a quick refresher what NEMAT 1.0 was and some of the design engineering that's gone behind NEMAT 2.0. We've done a soft launch in April. The why behind NEMAT, why does this even need to exist? Because we all know on this call, time is brain, and irrespective of who these patients are, their lives and their loved ones' lives are going to change. So what we do matters. We're a system, so we need to leverage our systemness as we cohort and triage these patients because we've got limited resources and we've got high intensity resources concentrated at certain areas of our health system, but we're a multi-hub, multi-spoke model. So how do we do this in a meaningful manner and to provide the right care to the right patient at the right time every single time? So our care is patient-centered rather than being resource-centered. So with that philosophy in mind, we launched NEMAT 1.0. All of you have been an integral part of how we've launched the program. And since 2017, its inception, on the left-hand side, you can see these are our top neuro emergencies. And then our mission statement is really this multidisciplinary collaboration to get the right patient to the right place at the right time every single time. So before we embarked on this redesign for NEMAT 2.0, we conducted a survey. Several of you responded to this survey, so thank you for that. Just showing you a snapshot of what those elements were that you requested for some redesign. Being able to do some imaging review directly via Haiku. How about moving to more HIPAA compliant platforms, getting secure chat groups, having a dashboard to review patients, improving handoffs, so on and so forth. So with that in mind, about a year and a half ago, we launched the NEMAT 2.0 initiative. It's a massive undertaking, lots of different team members, very grateful to several of you who are also volunteering. Now into the meat of what today's presentation is about. So we're just going to do a quick recap of the levels of transfer and how that is not going to change for NEMAT 2.0. We're going to talk about who's going to be first call, and then a little bit about communication, because that's going to be the bulk of how NEMAT 2.0 is going to change. So Dr. Beresin had a while ago, when we were thinking about these transfers, had suggested that we think about translating those time sensitive benchmarks from how we activate OR categories and angio suites to how we perform inter-hospital transfers. And we know that the inter-hospital transfer for critically ill patients can be fraught with a lot of difficulties. And while we want to help patients, there is a real possibility that we might end up causing harm as we're moving a patient from one point to another. So how do we uphold safety? With that in mind, we came up with some arbitrary time marks, such as 30 minutes departure from the referring site within 30 minutes. We're not talking about travel time. We're talking about from notification to departure from the referring hospital within 30 minutes would be life rescue. Within 60 minutes would be level 1. 4 hours would be level 2. And level 3 would be once a bed is available. And on the right-hand side, you can see some examples. Some of this is fairly intuitive. You have a suspected aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage patient, or you clearly see an aneurysm, that's going to be a life rescue. You cannot risk that patient's aneurysm re-rupturing. Any suspected elbow, confirmed elbow, that's going to be a life rescue. The ICH patients that were on the fence about to scuba, not to scuba, those patients can still be triaged as level 1s because we're going to evaluate them after we transfer them about whether they're going to be candidates or not, so on and so forth. So some of this is fairly intuitive, but we've got to remember that some of these numbers are arbitrary. The NEMAT 1.0 structure obviously had a lot of different things, including disease and site-specific team members. We were leveraging WhatsApp for disease-specific groups, and we maintain a robust QA database. A high-level summary of how these pathways were organized. For different disease processes, we were expecting a different person to be on call first, including the NEMAT hotline. So for any non-elbow emergent neurosurgical or neurological case, whether it was a life rescue level 1, level 2, we would expect the NEMAT hotline to be called. If it was a level 3 type transfer, and our neurosurgery residents have been taking those calls, our PRFs have been holding that neurosurgery triage phone, that is how our system had been organized. So these pathways were meant to facilitate all neurological and neurosurgical transfers, the hotline specifically for these level 1s, level 2 life rescue transfers. Now, who should be the first call and who needs this education? So the command center, or previously called the transfer center, is the primary team that's responsible for connecting all the different people who need to be involved for triage and transfer. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we provided this guidance to the transfer center about who to call when you hear about a particular type of case. We then simplified it into a table format. So I'll focus more on what is happening in NEMAT 2.0. For doing neurosurgical and neurological inter-hospital transfers, number one, we have to recognize it's not easy. A lot of the times when the people who are asking for help are calling the transfer center or now the command center, won't know what exactly they're dealing with. So we broke it down into the disease process. Like if the diagnosis is known, who do you call? Depending upon the type of emergency, what that default is going to be. So for the purposes of our audience today, just focusing for a moment on tumor emergencies. If it's a suspected life rescue, level 1, the NEMAT hotline should be looped in. Otherwise, our neurosurgery triage phone. Skull base, you have your internal specialty call pool that the command center is not going to have access to, but depending upon who, the hotline or the neurosurgery triage resident, whoever's hearing, you will then staff it or loop in the subspecialty call attending. For subarachnoid hemorrhage, our default destination is MSH. So you've got the default destination, who should be called first, depending upon what type of emergency we're suspecting. So some of this still remains fairly intuitive. For that trauma pathway, we know we're sending patients still to Mount Sinai Morningside. We did outline, we did specify for other emergencies that we hadn't specified as well in NEMAT 1.0, who the command center should loop in. This stroke algorithm, this is being refined by the stroke triage work group. Again, several of you are serving on that work group as well. For acute ischemic stroke, because Mount Sinai South Nassau is still not on Epic fully, but will come on Epic later. Sending site is outside the health system or Mount Sinai South Nassau. The command center is supposed to connect all these different providers. And then moving down, if the sending site is within our system, like Mount Sinai Brooklyn, MSPI, MSM, we have stroke attendings or stroke teams that are also covering those sites. So the stroke triage fellow may not be the right person to loop in. It should just be an attending to attending triage, depending upon the receiving site. Hemorrhagic stroke, again, we're connecting the NEMAT hotline, the referring providers, but essentially boiling it all down into two major process level steps. The first process step, this three-way call that is coordinated by the command center. So I'll move you from the left-hand side of the screen towards the right-hand side of the screen for process step 1. What all is happening on that call? So that three-way call between the referring provider and the right NEMAT pathway person, depending upon that table I showed you, depending upon the disease process that the referring provider is asking for help for, that first phone call is meant for triage. Does this patient need to be transferred? What are the preliminary recs so that this patient can be stabilized or certain treatments can be instituted in order to facilitate a safer, more efficient transfer? A throughput coordinator, previously called bed management. Throughput coordinator should also be on the line. So you have the transfer coordinator, the throughput coordinator. They will be on the line together, unlike previously where we had to make these different calls, make a call to bed management to try to find bed availability, etc. Throughput is now also system-wide. So they will also listen in. And the moment, say, I'm taking the call as a NEMAT hotline person, I'm going to ask throughput, hey, this is a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Do we have beds over at MSH Neuro ICU? Can you start looking? And they tell me, hey, we don't have any beds, but we have a bed over at Mount Sinai West. All of that can be done on this phone call. There's a central intensivist program that was rolled out about 2.5 years ago. The CI is supposed to be looped in for FYI for any NEMAT transfers, but they're also the primary go-to for other non-neuro ICU to ICU transfer. So the CI, the central intensivist, will get looped in by the transfer coordinator. The transfer level will be determined, and the transfer gets activated. So this first piece is all notification, similar to NEMAT 1.0. The second piece with getting throughput engaged on that first call, that's important, and confirming whoever that pathway person is, just confirm, hey, is throughput on the line? I want to know if there's a bed available at this site or the other. Okay. There's an epic order that needs to be placed by the sending. So this is, of course, relevant for MSHS hospitals, not non-MSHS hospitals. What does that transfer order do? That transfer order helps us track that patient within Epic, and it also activates all the downstream processes for the command center. So the sending will place that Epic order. The transfer coordinator or the NEMAT NEMAT hotline person or that NEMAT pathway person, whether it's a neurosurgery triage resident, stroke fellow, NEMAT hotline on call, Epic secure chat groups for ongoing care coordination should be created, and all those relevant parties that were not previously on our WhatsApp groups, like throughput, like the transfer center, like the receiving EDs, will all get added on for ongoing care coordination. Then there is a second step that needs to happen. The ambulance is on the way, but the frontline teams, remember, we've only gotten initial triage information. The frontline teams, the transfer coordinator will connect the frontline provider. We'll also connect nursing for sign out, and then we can continue using that Epic Secure Chat for ongoing troubleshooting. Just general rules for triage and transfer. So some key rules for triage and transfer. Now begin to think of that first process level step, that first phone call, as that trigger call. That trigger call is where we're gathering some preliminary information, performing some clinical decision making, providing some preliminary recommendations, and then determining what that transfer level should be, the transfer order goes in, etc. So that's our trigger call. Ongoing care coordination, it's a lot of different hands on deck when we're moving a critically ill patient, or when we're moving any patient for that matter, from anywhere within our health system or anywhere in the tri-state area or even internationally. There's a lot of ongoing care coordination. So who are those people who need to be kept in the loop and who also need to receive timely information? So just thinking about that for a moment, whether it's the throughput group, whether it's the ED that's going to send a patient from ED to ED, those ED providers, they all need to be looped in for ongoing care coordination. So you can leverage that Epic Secure Chat for that. And then follow-up calls. Just like NEMAT 1.0, if you sent a message and nobody answers it, within 3 to 5 minutes, I would say pick up the phone and call up the person you need to get in touch with. No open loop communication. In the next few slides, I'm just going to give you an overview of a direct comparison of specific elements of NEMAT 1.0 and NEMAT 2.0, and then we can leave some time for questions. For the purposes of the residents and the PRFs and for training purposes, in the latter half of the slides, I've included specific case examples. We're not going to go over every case scenario, but when I leave room for questions, if specific case scenarios need to be discussed, of course, we can always review that. Otherwise, I'm going to make all these slides available for your review. And as always, I'm available to answer any questions anytime. All right, so first, notification for triage. We used to say phone call to the transfer center. Now it's the command center. Command center because it includes both the transfer center and throughput under that same umbrella. That multi-way call or that three-way, why even go through the transfer center or command center, right? Because each of these calls is going to be recorded. It's going to be recorded for quality assurance purposes, and we can run QA on the call transcripts. What went well? What could we have learned? What could we have done better? Okay. Bed allocation. We used to make all these separate phone calls. We used to call up different units. Now the command center loops in throughput, and we're going to be able to get eyes on system-wide beds. Triage and transfer, those levels remain the same in NEMAT 1.0 and NEMAT 2.0. Epic transfer order. Previously, we didn't have any Epic components built in for triage and transfer. Now we have specific tools in Epic, including this transfer order. Once that order goes in, these patients will populate a dashboard or a patient list where we can see all neurological, neurosurgical transfers that are coming through. So we'll have that Epic dashboard. The dashboard has elements that will include, whether frontline provider handoff is given, nursing handoff given, those little elements that make a difference. We also built out an Epic timeline. So if you want to know, when did my patient get K-Centra, you can look at the exact time that patient received K-Centra. When was that CT scan or CTA ordered? When did the patient get intubated? You can see all of those different timestamps on that Epic NEMAT timeline. Communication via texts. So Epic Secure Chat for ongoing care coordination, there are several elements of Epic Secure Chat that have been developed for the purposes of NEMAT 2.0. There are some that will go online later this year as well, and I'll highlight that. Documentation. We didn't always document these triage notes. Now we're going to have these templated triage notes for patients we're triaging, so that those preliminary recommendations also have some record in Epic. The ambulance ETA. I'm sure several of you remember picking up the phone and asking, hey, when is the ambulance getting there? There's going to be a stat call dashboard link within Epic Haiku, and you can click on that and take a look at where the ambulance is by, it's just 2 to 3 minutes behind the actual live location. And quality assurance, of course, with a lot of the real-time tools that we're building into Epic, we can do some real-time visualization. So now for non-MSHS hospitals, of course, we're not going to have an Epic order, but that call will initiate a pre-admission and a Mount Sinai medical record number. Remember how it used to take sometimes, would take anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes to sometimes get patients registered, you have to call admitting, etc. By doing this, we should be able to bypass that process, and having a pre-admission encounter created for the patient, you can also pend orders for the patient. We've also, these are just some nitty-gritties. I don't think we need to look at that. Just want to give you a just show you a picture of how that NEMAT review will look. If you want to wrench it in, you go to Epic, go to flow sheets, and look for NEMAT review, and you'll be able to wrench this in. You can take a look at the timestamps for different medication scans, etc. Those NEMAT triage notes will also be embedded by way of a click. We should be able to enter these notes in. They're made easy so that we can input some of this data and then also do some reporting from a quality assurance purpose. In terms of communication, so we were leaning a lot on these groups. We were doing individual texts as well as group texts. That we know that we need to get a lot of people on that call with information at the same time, right? So we have those process 1 and process 2 level steps. You can see in NEMAT 1.0, we were doing all this texting kind of variable for different processes. So I broke it down by MSHS hospitals and non-MSHS hospitals and disease processes for image sharing. This becomes important, particularly for image sharing. As a health system, we've pretty much moved to VizAI for getting all of our stroke images, right? So we can really leverage that. And VizAI also has some capabilities for group texting and group messaging, which in the next few weeks, we should know more about. There are, Hazim and a few others are leading charge of communicating with VizAI about those groups. So potentially a lot of that trigger group communication can happen on VizAI for stroke patients, and then phone calls for those other disease processes, and particularly for places that are not on VizAI. And then for ongoing care coordination, everything can leverage Epic Secure Chat. This is just a quick comparison of those different devices, different platforms, I apologize, for different platforms, but we should not think of WhatsApp or group text as being HIPAA compliant, although there's end-to-end encryption. These are not HIPAA compliant, and the health system does not support the use of WhatsApp. So one of the most important things that we're going to leverage now is Epic Secure Chat for ongoing care coordination. So let me just show you a few examples and why this is good and how it can be made better. This is a patient coming from Mount Sinai, Brooklyn, over to Mount Sinai West. It's an ICH patient. This is the Mount Sinai Brooklyn stroke attending. We've got some information about the patient's family, phone numbers, etc., to start getting some consents. This is the NEMAT attending. We've got the Mount Sinai stroke PA looped in. We've got the Mount Sinai West PRF looped in. This is another example. We've got the ED, the stroke triage fellow. We've got the transfer coordinator. So you have multiple people who don't sit on WhatsApp, on your group text, and for you to remember who to add, rather than doing that, there are predefined groups that have been created on Epic Secure Chat, and you just pull in. You can pull in the transfer center group, you can pull in the throughput group. They have, anywhere between 25 to 50 people, and whoever is on call signs in. So I, as the frontline provider doing triage, don't need to know who specifically is on call from those other teams, or who is that ED triage attending who's taking care of my patient before I move them from Mount Sinai Morningside ED to MSH Neuro ICU. So here's another patient, subarachnoid hemorrhage triage from Mount Sinai Morningside. The transfer coordinator, the NEMAT attending, the Mount Sinai Morningside ED attending, which the transfer coordinator added. We're getting some clinical updates. We have the Mount Sinai Morningside PA providing us with updates. The EVD is going in. The patient's getting better. We're getting ready to move the patient, and we provide feedback to our ED teams as well, because how we become better when we learn together, and what was done well, providing just-in-time feedback, we can leverage Epic Secure Chat for that as well. This is a non-MSHS hospital transfer request. You might ask, hey, we don't have an MRN for that patient. So how are we going to do this? You start with the patient's last name and date of birth. We've got information. we decided not to transfer this particular patient. But if we were going to, we would have had a Mount Sinai medical record number, and then we changed the title of the chat. All right, so I'm going to stop here so we can take some questions. Right now, Epic Secure Chat does not have the ability to share videos. We have asked for that ability. There are specific things within Epic Secure Chat, particularly muting specific groups, because it's used both for inpatients as well as for transfers. There are also going to be notification levels where you can change the color of the message as well as the sound of the message, particularly if it's an urgent emergent message. So I'll stop there. Questions, concerns, and I'll, of course, make the slides available. And I've broken it down into SA. How do you do this for SAH, for ICH, for brain tumor, so on and so forth.
Do we have any comments from those who use this more frequently, maybe from the vascular group?
Neha, do we have a workaround? Hey, do we have a workaround for image sharing for patients coming in from outside the system in the short term?
We do for some of the hospitals like Lila. So live images for sharing images right now, asking those hospitals to make a video without taking the patient's name or date of birth in that video, sending it to our phones. We're still doing that for non-MSHS hospitals. We're currently discussing potentially using Microsoft Teams versus Lila versus a combination of these for the non-MSHS hospitals. For stroke specifically, a lot of our non-MSHS hospitals, so the ones that send us patients are, I should say, MSHS affiliate hospitals, which are not MSHS hospitals, but which are our affiliate hospitals like Brooklyn Hospital or Bronx, Lebanon. They're also moving to Viz AI. So getting stroke imaging is going to be fairly easy there. Creating those group chats, kind of like what we have on WhatsApp, on Viz AI, like all of that is going to be very feasible. And Viz AI we should be able to leverage that for stroke. For the others, I think Lila is probably going to be our go-to, but there are some talks about Microsoft Teams as well. And as soon as we have a consensus from all the different stakeholders, we'll share it with this group as well.
Okay.
I don't think Lila works outside of the network, though.
If somebody uploads those images from a CD to Lila, then we should be able to do that. The transfer.
No, I mean, if you're not on an MSH or an MSHS network, you can't log into Lila. Right. You can't do it when you're outside the hospital.
You're right. You're right about that. That is a limitation. You have to be on a hospital network to be able to review those. Now, whether the new VPN transition, because they are going to move to a separate way of authenticating, there's a authenticator app, whether that will change it because the VPN tunnel will change, who knows? But for more technical questions, of course, we have members of the DTP team that we are closely collaborating with. So please send me your technical questions. I am by no means a technical expert, but we can certainly get the right people to answer. Or if something is not available, ask for that to be made available for our triage. For now, we're still taking, for the non-MSHS hospitals, still those videos without the name and the date of birth in those videos, as a short-term solution.
Neha, I had a question. Can you clarify for us, because I've heard it both ways, whether spine emergencies fit into NEMAT or not? And secondary question is, the world seems to be moving towards secure chat, but most of us don't have it in our workflow because you have to go through that extra step that Dr. Betterson's often talked about to see it. Is there any kind of interface going on to help see if that can be pushed or viewed in other ways on our phone through the standard messaging apps?
Both great questions. So spine is very much part of the NEMAT pathways. Now, when we think about spine emergencies, if it is a patient who has spinal cord compression and they're going to need to go to the OR, yes, the NEMAT hotline should be looped in, and the person who's holding the NEMAT hotline should provide preliminary recommendations just like they do for other emergencies. The level 3 spine transfers, having our neurosurgery triage phone looped in for those level 3 transfers, that should still be the case. Tanvir, if there are any specific cases, and I should say this for all NEMAT QA queries, please send us an email with the patient's, please send me an email with the name and medical record number, just a one-liner on what the issue was. I will get that case reviewed, and I'm going to share the findings with you. We're also going to start a bi-monthly NEMAT QA committee meeting. Again, several of you, thank you for volunteering to serve on that QA committee. We're going to be reviewing these cases in more detail, and in the spirit of continuous learning, provide feedback on that as well. So spine, the long and short of it, spine is very much part of how we do, how we should be including all of these, pathways for triaging. Orthopedic spine. Now, orthopedic spine is not going to go to us. They have their own ways of triaging. So Tanvir, for neurosurgical spine cases, NEMAT is going to be the go-to. Any questions about that before I answer? Okay, perfect. Thank you. And regarding Epic Secure Chat, several of you may already have Epic Haiku on your phones. If you don't have Epic Haiku on your phone, it's worthwhile putting in a ticket and getting Epic Haiku on your phone. Once you change your status to available or busy, you should receive an Epic Secure Chat notification, just like you receive for your text messages. You do have to log into that Epic Secure Chat. So what I've done is I've activated Face ID. So when I look at my screen and I want to log into Epic Secure Chat, I just get logged in. I don't have to, put in my password, etc. So you could do that, and then it takes you directly to Epic Secure Chat. That's one way to do it. When you're on a desktop or a laptop and you're logged into Epic, there are ways of changing the settings as well. If you want any Epic Secure Chat messages the moment they arrive, if you want that available on your desktop, you just have, that's the default setting. I personally don't like the Epic Secure Chat pop-up while I'm typing notes or reviewing patients. Like, I will go to it. So I have Epic Secure Chat activated on my phone to show me notifications, but on my workstation, I changed it that I don't want to see it on my workstation till I go take a look at it. So there are lots of settings that you can customize. If there is interest in getting a demo of Epic Secure Chat and getting questions answered, we can certainly facilitate it with the DTP experts with Epic Secure Chat. And they're also looking for feedback on how we're using it. Sometimes it can get intrusive. As a wellness champion, I'm very, very cognizant of digital overload, and digital hygiene needs to be preserved. So we've pushed back on some things that the health system wanted to activate, for example, overriding the DND notifications on iOS devices. The health system was looking to potentially activate that. We pushed back on that. We said, no, if somebody's not on call, they should not be getting notifications. You can certainly change your notification to busy or offline. You can also forward your messages to whoever else is on call. So I think if there is interest from the group, and I think it may be worthwhile getting a demo, as well as a quick refresher of how to use some of the new tools and settings in Epic Secure Chat.